If you look at the verify chain method and at the loop we wrote in there, if you're coming from another programming language, you might wonder, is there no for loop where you have this index built in? The answer is no. There is no for loop with an index, with an iterator built in. You might know this code here, for example, from JavaScript, but also from other programming languages. There is no for loop like that in Python. But there is a special function, the range function. And with that, we can actually get there. Let's see how that works. Let's rewrite our verify chain function here with the help of range. So for that, I'll use the for keyword again, of course. And now I'll use my block index variable here. I'll comment it out up there, and I'll actually comment out the entire code down there. That was just a shortcut in my IDE, by the way. You can search the shortcuts for comment, or in edit, you can also use toggle block or line comment. This is how you comment out code. So now I'm creating a new for loop where I get the block index instead of the block, and I get it by still using the in keyword. That's the only loop we have in Python. But now I'm looping through range, and range now simply takes some inputs to define through which numbers it should go. And this is actually a bit of a misleading hint here. You can enter length blockchain. So the length of the blockchain. If we do that, what will happen? Well, let's have a look at how range works. If I create a simple loop here in the REPL for I in range 5, for example, and I print I, we can see that it prints 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So range simply in the end creates a list-like object which holds the numbers up to the number you specify here, excluding that number though. So 5 is not part of the list, but it starts at 0 by default and goes all the way up to the number, again, excluding it. So in our code, range with the length of blockchain will go all the way up to the length of the blockchain minus 1. So if we have two elements in our blockchain, it will start at 0 and it will also contain the value 1, length minus 1, because again, it excludes that last value. And this is exactly what we need. Our index should start with 0, and that is what range does. And it should also go all the way up to the length of the blockchain minus 1, because index is length minus 1 basically. We start at 0, not at 1. So with that, we got our block index starting at 0. And now we can copy that old code here from the previous loop into our new loop and comment it back in. And now I still check if block index is equal to 0, because for the first element, I still don't want to do anything. I don't need to increment it manually anymore though, because that is now happening automatically kind of. We're simply looping through a list of numbers now. So now I can continue here. However, important, I need to change this condition. We no longer have the block, we just have the block index. So here I actually need to choose blockchain and now block index. And now for that list, which this returns, because remember, a blockchain is a list and the block itself also is a list. And therefore, we actually have two lists we're accessing, the blockchain. We're getting the block with this index, and that block in turn is a list, and there we want to get the first element. So now this is what we're doing here with the help of block index. And with that, if I rerun my code here, and I add transaction values like this, and I output my list, you see this works. If I now manipulate it, we again have an invalid blockchain, so this is working, because now we're correctly running through the same logic as before, but a bit leaner. We don't have to manage block index manually anymore. This is done for us by the range function. And just in case you want to see the blockchain when it is invalid, we can of course also go to our verify blockchain case here, and besides printing invalid blockchain, we can also print the blockchain elements right before quitting. So if we do that, and I execute that file again, and I add a new value 10, and I add a new value 20, and I manipulate the blockchain, you see now we also output it before quitting, And here we can see the cause of the problem. The first block is incorrect because this first element of the second block doesn't match the first block. And hence it's invalid, that's correct. We quit, and now we're using the range function for that. The range function is a great alternative for cases like that, where you're only partly interested in the elements of a list, and you're more interested in the index of the elements. Well, then range allows you to simply go through the indices of a list, get that index, and then use it inside the loop body. Now, one important information which I want to show you in the REPL, range actually takes more than one argument. If you use one, it starts at 0. But sometimes you also want to start at a different place. So you can also write if I in range 5, 10, for example, and now print I. What would you expect to get now? This actually will start at 5, so this is now included, not excluded, and goes all the way up to your final value, which it still excludes. So this is now the output you're getting. And sometimes you also want to have steps that are different from 1, because you see the default is that it always increments by 1. Well, in that case, you can write for I in range 5, 22, and if I now print I, you see we get 5, 7, 9, 11, and so on. So it increments I by 2 in every iteration, so to say. This is the flexibility you have with range. Now you can also use range with negative numbers. What about floats? If we use for I in range 5.0, 10.0, .5, and I now print I, you see this does not work. Float object cannot be interpreted as an integer, so range does work with negative numbers, but not with floats. It only works with negative and positive integers.